Hey racers, this is Paul with Speed Squad. Got a new project on the bench. Got an RJ Speed Legends car here. Picked this up at Cole's Hot Lap Hobbies in Pueblo, Colorado. Cole is working to get a new class of these started. I picked one up and designed some Speed Squad products just to make the assembly a little better, make the car a little sturdier, make it last a little longer. With that, let's hop into the build. I've pre-built this car just to make sure everything's in place, all the parts and hardware were there. And then just to see if I could find any issues in the car, or if there's any quirks or tweaks that I could provide you guys and make the build a little easier. One of the things I found here when opening bag 1 is it comes with all the screws and hardware. It comes with 6 nylon spacers. These spacers are not pre-threaded from the factory. So pre-threading them, they are very, very tight, which is a good thing because you want the car to be solid. Make sure nothing falls apart while you're racing. My suggestion is with this is do a little pre-threading on these before assembling it. One of the steps to make pre-threading easier, throw a little grease on the screws. Just a little dab of the grease and oil, anything will help cut the threads in this nylon, also help keep it cool. And as you're pre-threading it, just kind of slowly work it in. Take your time, take it easy. These are all pre-threaded, so we won't go through every one of them. And that way, when you go to assemble the car, you're not fighting with it. One step you can do too is to help with pre-threading. Grab a small pair of pliers, just give it a little squeeze and slowly work that screw in. Once you get them all pre-threaded, you can hop into step 1 here and start building the chassis. If you hear the barking in the background, my little buddy Chihuahua Ozzy is as excited about this as I am. So one thing to look at when you're building a chassis, just kind of look what they got for instructions. Hold the chassis the same way. So what we're looking at is we got spacers, 2 in the back, 1 in the bottom right in front of the motor mount. We got 1 top center. We got 1 about 3/4 of the way up from the rear in the bottom, and 1 in the very front in the bottom. We're going to start at the back of this and just work our way forward. As we do this, we'll stop periodically, check, make sure we got spacers in the correct place, because I have installed them wrong. Nothing critical, just a quick remove the screw, put the spacer in the right space, and carry on with your project. As you're installing these spacers, tighten them down all the way. Everybody's going to have their own unique way of building. This is just the way I've done it, been doing it for years, and it works for me. Do what works for you. If this is a good guide, I'm glad it helps. So we're looking at this, we got the 2 rear spacers. Our next spacer, use the little Allen key here, is going to be this one right here. Another quick check to make sure we match. Alright, perfect. We're going to jump up to the center right there in the middle. That one didn't get threaded all the way, so we're going to give it a little light squeeze with the pliers, get that thing in there tight. Alright, looking good. Seeing what the directions say, we're going to hop up. We're going to jump into this one right here. Our final spacer is going in the very front. Looking at this compared to our schematics here, we're looking good. Put that final spacer right there in the front. And the first half of the chassis is complete and ready to go. So one step we are going to skip on this first part of the build is in the instructions. It's got us installing the short body mounts. And those are going to mount on the top screw hole near the motor mount. So we've got a Speed Squad product that we're going to put in place here. So once we get a full chassis build, we're going to go in, jump into the Speed Squad products, talk about those a little bit, show everybody what we got going on here, and eventually have a running car. So our next step here, we're throwing in our speed control battery receiver tray. Then we're going to throw in our steering mount. One thing you want to watch on a steering mount, and I almost did it backwards right now, look at your instructions. And you want to look and see, is make sure you got this front slide right here, even with the front of this chassis. This is where your bumper mounts. Once you get those pieces in, you can grab the other half of your chassis, slide that steering mount in, slide the battery ESC receiver tray together, make sure everything's lined up, grab your screws, start tightening down the nylon spacers on the other side of your chassis. Same with these. I'm going to tighten these all the way down till they're just snug. Not over tight, but you don't want them loose right now. Later in the directions, we're going to go through and loosen these up just a little bit. You do one little flex in this chassis. But for me, the way it works for me in the past is just get these a little snug at first, make sure everything's seated properly, everything's in the correct place. I will mention as we build, and I'll mention this later when we get into Speed Squad products, that from the factory, the RJ Speed kit here, all of the screws are standard American. So I've got a 3/32 Allen wrench that's included with the kit. Speed Squad products, we are going to use metric screws for these. Typically 1.5 millimeter, 2 millimeter for everything we need. Those are more and more common nowadays. Only a handful of manufacturers are producing kits with American screws. Alright, there we have the chassis built. On to step 5, putting the kingpins in. So one thing I did notice on these kingpins is it comes with these small nylon lock nuts. They are very, very tight. The nylon on these things is perfect for this type of equipment. It's going to hold in place, not have any issues. So when you are putting this together, you're going to have to use a small pair of pliers just to grab this kingpin and tighten these nylon lock nuts down. You can install these without a small socket set or a nut driver. It does make it a little more difficult. So in step 5, they've got these thin, small small nuts as I drop it. So these thread on to the kingpin, and they're going to thread all the way on, and I just finger tighten them for now. So you can take your kingpin, put it through the outer hole on the steering assembly, grab your lock nut. If you want to use pliers, you can use pliers. If you got a small nut driver, a small socket set, those work perfect too. Once you get that started, you can grab that kingpin with a pair of pliers and just slowly start screwing that together. And I suggest grabbing this near the end, that way if it does slip a little bit, it does have the potential to mar these ever so slightly, could affect steering. As you can see, I am struggling with this as tight as these screws are. I think we can give a try here is grab that. Nope. Maybe a bigger pair of pliers. right-handed, so I'm switching hands. Make sure I get a good grip on this. There we go. Once you get that tightened down, you'll feel it spin like that. Grab your other kingpin. Grab another lock washer. Start it on there, finger tight. Get a good grip on that kingpin on the very end. Take your nut driver and just start working it on. As you can see, these can be quite difficult. We're going to try this one first. We're going to grab a piece of electrical tape, or if you got something like a neoprene glove handy, just to kind of help protect and add a little grip. Just wrap that around the kingpin a couple times. That way you're not completely marring it up and destroying it. Grab that lock nut, get that started again. And just start working it. And these are very tight. These can be very difficult to get in place. It is still slipping. We're going to go ahead and grab it and see if we can get enough of a bite that we're not spinning. Nope, we're still spinning. Let's see if we got another one. I've got a couple of these pre-threaded and ready to go. I just got to find them. Fuck it, we're starting to build over. Yep, there we go. Found a pre-threaded one here. Maybe this one will go on a little easier. Alright. Got the kingpins installed. Next step on this is install the axles into the steering blocks. So with these, for the axles here, what you want to look at is when these are sitting on the car, they're going to sit on the car and they're going to point facing in. So you want to install your axles. Make sure those are facing out. That's going to be quite a tight fit on that. They do need to be pressed in. As you can see, this one's very tight. Might have to thread it on just to get it started. Once it's in place, press it. Or grab a pair of pliers. Just kind of keep threading it on. There we go. Now we can see that axle starting to protrude. Once it's on through where the threading's at. We just keep going until we find that sweet spot where it wants to slide in. There we go. That's what we're looking for. So we're going to slide those down till you get to that serrated edge of that axle. Those are actually going to be pressed in. The next step with this is working with the E-clips. For all the new RC fans out there, if you haven't been around since the 80s and don't know what an E-clip is, this is going to be your lesson in finding small, tiny parts in carpet and on floors. These will go flying. They are not fun to work with. but they are rock solid. They work every time, no issues. So typically what I do is I'll grab an E-clip, get a small pair of pliers, and you'll see on the back of that E-clip there's a small little spot where you can get a hold of that. Slide that in to the grooved area on this axle, get it started, and then just squeeze it into place with your pliers. You'll hear it snap. You can reach on there, give it a tug, give it a twist. They're very tight. Once they're in place, they're very difficult to get off. They can come off with pliers, but it takes a little work. Grab your second E-clip. Get a good hold with your pliers. Same thing. Slide it into that groove on that axle. Once it's into that groove, just kind of hold it into place. Squeeze it between the pliers and the axle. You can hear it snap into place. Make sure it's on there rock solid. That is good and tight. So the next step in the instructions is to actually press these down. Excuse me. You want to press these axles all the way down. You can see I've got it started there. It's going through. And it's going to bite into that plastic. There we go. So once we get down so far, I'll use this. You're going to see where that axle and the steering end of that is going to meet. So you need to be on a solid surface on the edge of a table. I'll be off screen, but I'll be on the edge of my table. I'll finish pushing that axle all the way through. Get that thing in there as far as you can. Another thing you could do, grab a pair of pliers, kind of give it a squeeze. If they want to go into place right, this doesn't always work. Watch your fingers doing this. Alright, perfect. We got that axle in place. Go with the second one, same thing. We're just going to put it in there, start pressing down. See that axle start sliding into place. Just keep doing that until we go all the way in there. Same thing, get to the edge of this. You can see we're getting close. We're going to start hitting, so we're just going to go to the edge of our table here. Get that axle in there. Maybe give it a little squeeze with the pliers. There we go. That's a good angle. You can see that right there. Get a good angle on that. Start squeezing with your pliers. You're going to see that axle slide all the way in. That E-clip's touching. Just double check. We're a little off on this one. Same thing. For me, what's working for me is I'm coming in from this side of the steering block, getting a good bite on that axle, just squeezing down. Right. Next step with this, one thing I noticed when I was building these, tolerances are very tight. So these kingpins are 1/8 of an inch. When they slide into place, they can be very tight. These ones aren't too bad. One thing you can do is a 1/8 inch drill bit. I've got tools laying around from other RC builds, so I've got a 1/8 reamer. You can just slide that in there, work that back and forth a few times. Get where I can get my hands out of your way. Do the same thing for both of these. Slide it back and forth. Just double check this one. Slide it back and forth. We're good and free. Make sure you got any dirt, dust, debris out of there. Slide that over your kingpin. Slide the left side over the kingpin. Just see how free they are. Give them a little flick. They spin free, you're good. Your steering is going to be solid. So next step in the instructions. Once we get the axle or steering blocks on, we're going to install 2 springs that are provided in the kit. These are your front suspension. Those just slide over the top. We've got a bar to hold everything into place. That's going to slide over. This is going to be a very tight fit. So I'll slide one on. I'll bring it over. You can slide both sides on. It is going to spring off. These also require E-clips for retaining this into place. So you can slide this down, hold that spring. Let's see if we can do this with a finger today. So, slide that down. Let it slide up just enough that you can see that E-clip want to pop into the groove in that kingpin. Get it seated in there. Grab your pliers. Give it a little click into place, and that side's in. We'll go to our right side. We're going to lose a spring onto the floor. We're going to work that into place. Grab another E-clip. I'm just setting the E-clip on this brace and then letting it slide up very slowly. That's not binding up. Oh, that's actually going to hold into place. It's on a little bit of a bind right now. So we can grab this E-clip, get it on our pliers, get it into that groove, kind of hold it in there with a finger, thumbnail, snap it into place, and we can work this free. If it does bind a little bit, grab your Allen wrench and just give it a little tweak, and you'll see that pop into place. So what we're looking at here is once that's in place, that allows our suspension to ride and ensure that we're in the right place on the track. We are going to jump around a little bit in the instructions just because I'm going to do the build just slightly different because of the Speed Squad products. So we haven't put our body mounts on. The front body mounts we can put on. It's going to be the longer of the two body mounts. You can use two of the same screws as they use to do the chassis spacers. Same thing, 3/32. These are not threaded from the factory, so it makes life just a little easier if you thread them. So you throw that screw through there, take that body mount, you can just kind of start it with your fingers. Start threading it on. Once pre-threaded, these are a little easier. So with these body mounts, a couple things you can do. They designed the kit so they can use nuts and or cotter pins. So there are holes in these. So what I typically do, just to make sure I'm lined up, I throw a cotter pin, body pin, whatever you want to call it, on there. Make sure it's facing front. I also use it as a little leverage as I'm tightening this down. Get that body mount tightened down. We're good on that one. Hop to the other side. Same thing, we're going to run the screw right up through. Start that body mount. Just screw it down as far as we can right there. Run that body pin through. Make sure we're lined up and facing front. Use it for a little bit of leverage. Tighten that body mount down. We'll get to the rear body mounts here in a few. Next step in the instructions here, they've got us building the rear end, a differential. We're actually going to hop to the back page here where they got the breakdown of the entire car. And we can kind of see what we're going on with here. So we got the actual 5730. Then 5752 is going to be placed on there. You can see a large ring that's going to fit over. We've got our gear. So before we put our gear on, we do have to put the balls in to allow it to slip when needed. Directions say to put one of the balls in every other hole on the gear. Use your fingers, grab a pair of tweezers, whatever works for you. Just drop that ball in, press it in with your thumb. It's not going to fall out. They will move around a little bit. So they provide 8 balls. You only need 6. Unless I'm miscounting. There's 3. 4, 5, and 6. So you can move it around, you can hear them rattle, make sure they're not in there. They are moving. And within the instructions too, they say to put a little bit of grease on there. Everybody's got a different grease they use. I like the pink. It's worked best for me in the past, so I just take a little bit of that. However you want to do it. Pair of tweezers. I'll put just a little bit on this ring here to make sure we've got a little extra coverage. And I'll just take with my tweezers and I'll dab a little on each one of the balls we dropped into the gear. Once we got a little grease in place, we can go ahead and slide that on. Make sure it's fitting in there snugly. I'll give it a little twist just to make sure some of that grease spins around. See the balls sticking up on the other side. Some people add grease, some don't. I like a little extra grease just to help prevent additional wear. With that, we can take our other large ring, we can slide that down on there. It's just going to kind of be loose, so we're going to let it go. We've got another adapter here. This will actually slide in and center that. So once we get that in there, I'll just kind of give it a little twist, make sure everything's spinning, make sure it's centered. Then we're going to take our wheel holder, slide that on. You can see this thing's going to slide into the center of that. So as that slides together, you just want to work it a little bit. Make sure it's going into place. That'll slide tight. Give it another couple little spins. Just spread that grease out. Make sure we're good. Next step on that, we've got a flat washer. We're going to throw that on there. We've got a thrust bearing, so I'll do the same thing with this. I'm going to throw a little grease on this. Once we get a little grease on that, grab a rag, wipe our fingers off, and slide that down. Put that on there, just give it a little spin, apply a little extra grease to that back side. Take our second flat washer, slide that on. Our last washer, you take a look at it, it's going to have a slight cone shape. That's going to be very hard to see on the video. But if you're holding it and looking at it, you can see how it's convex shape. So what you want to do is to make sure that when you put it on, that it's pointing towards the top, because that's what's going to provide pressure as we tighten this axle nut down. So last piece is going to be the red nylon nut. This is another one of those that's very, very tight. I suggest pre-threading it before you start putting it on. Once you get it pre-threaded and you get it started, grab a pair of pliers, Just slowly start working it into place. Once you get it into place, just get it snug. Give the wheel a little twist. You should feel some tension in there, a little bit of resistance, but it should move. So when you're at the track, that's when you're going to adjust how much slip you want, depending on how high grip the traction is. All right, for mounting the axle in place, there's a couple shims included. There's a couple bushings included. Some people are going to use bearings here locally in Colorado. We're trying to keep this a little simpler, get more people into the hobby. So we're keeping it with everything that comes in the box. So we're going to stick with bushings. The one issue that you are going to run into is the fit with these ride heights are very tight. So these slip into here right where you can see my finger. I had to sand these out. I did this prior to doing the video just because it is a little work. There's a lot of good videos on YouTube. If you just type in RJ Legends or RJ Speed Legends build, you'll find some videos that they walk you through step by step how they do that. But once you get that sanded out, these are going to pop into place. They are going to be tight. Pop one side in. You can go either direction. I like a lower ride height, so I put the hole towards the bottom of the chassis. If you want a little higher ride height, you flip it upside down. And even with them being sanded, it can be a little work to get them in place. There you go. Once those are in, slide your bushings in. And there you have a small part of your chassis being built. So one thing we've done here at Speed Squad, in the directions, when you're putting this together, you want to slide your axle through. This other bushing you just kind of want to hold into place. They can be a little tight fitting, especially if you go in an angle like I'm doing. You want to slide that through. You're going to have a white spacer. That's going to go in there. And then you're going to have your other rear hub. That's going to slide on there too. If you press this all together and tighten it down, it's not going to allow this to spin correctly.